In the sprawling tapestry of ancient Greece, a civilization known for its art, philosophy, and warfare, there exists a darker, less discussed undercurrent, one that deals with power, sexuality, and subjugation. The tragic life of a male concubine in ancient Greece attempts to illuminate this world through a deeply human, unflinching lens. Whether you're coming to it as a historian, a casual viewer, or someone drawn to layered storytelling, this project leaves a lasting impression, both intellectually and emotionally. At the core of this narrative is a young male figure named Prapsk, deliberately whose life is defined not by his aspirations, but by his role within the political and erotic economy of his time. The storytelling wastes no time romanticizing the classical world. Instead, it begins in medias res, placing viewers right into the domestic interior of an Athenian nobleman's household. The choice of setting is crucial. The domestic sphere in ancient Greek society was not just private but loaded with symbolic and political meaning. And here, within its painted walls and flickering oil lamps, our protagonist exists more as property than person. The narrative is driven not by grand political events or sweeping wars, but by the subtle, almost claustrophobic psychological erosion of the central character. This is a story about what happens when a person's identity is reduced to a function, when beauty becomes both a currency and a curse. The project excels at capturing that tension without turning its subject into mere spectacle. There's an astonishing restraint in the direction, allowing the silences, the glances, the shifts in posture to say just as much as any monologue or exposition. Technically, the design elements are meticulous. If this is a film or digital visual piece, then the production team clearly did their homework. Wardrobe choices are historically grounded. Chitons and Homatians are not stylized for glamour, but rendered with realism. The materials have that coarse, homespun quality, typical of the time. Hair and makeup follow archaeological insights rather than modern beauty standards. Every detail, from the bronze fittings on doors to the soot-smudged oil lamps, helps create an immersive world that feels as lived in as it is researched. The cinematography complements the tone beautifully. We often see the protagonist framed within doorways or behind latticed screens, reinforcing his status as both seen and unseen, desirable and invisible. Lighting is used not just for mood, but for meaning. Scenes set during daylight often feel emotionally colder, more exposed. Night sequences, lit by fire or lamp, carry a warmth that ironically contrasts with the character's increasing isolation. There's a haunting visual metaphor at play. The warmer the light, the colder the human connection. From a narrative standpoint, the project refuses to give us an easy resolution. This is not a redemption story, nor is it a revenge fantasy. It's a tragedy in the classical sense. A character fated to suffer, not necessarily through flaw, but through the unyielding structure of the society around him. The writers lean heavily into the fatalism of Greek drama, but without relying on overt references to gods or myth. That's a bold move, and one that pays off. It allows the audience to confront the realities of power and exploitation without the safety net of allegory. One of the strongest performance aspects comes from the lead actor. There's a physicality to the performance that communicates volumes even in stillness. The smallest gestures, a flinch, a breath caught in the throat, a stiffening of the shoulders, carry the weight of entire scenes. You can tell, this is an actor who understands the layers of the role, the necessity of performance within the character. S-World, the constant calculation of how to present oneself to survive. The vulnerability is not just emotional, but strategic. In many ways, the performance is about someone learning to manipulate their own subjugation, using charm as a survival tactic even when it corrodes them from the inside. The supporting cast also brings depth. The nobleman, whose household the protagonist resides in, is not a one-note villain. He's written and performed with chilling ambiguity. At times tender, at other times coldly transactional. He embodies the way affection and possession were often blurred in ancient relationships, structured by hierarchy. This complexity is echoed in secondary characters, the jealous wife, the older servant, the visiting political figure, all of whom seem aware of the protagonist's place, but either accept it or exploit it, depending on their own standing. Language and dialogue are handled with care. If this is an English language production, the script opts for elevated but accessible prose, nothing too modern, but not weighed down by archaic flourishes either. If it's a subtitled piece from another language, the translation maintains lyrical precision without losing cultural specificity. There are monologues that stick with you long after, not because they aim for poetic grandeur, but because they capture the bitter clarity of someone seeing their life with unflinching honesty. Music and sound design are equally effective. The score, if present, is understated, relying more on drone tones, minor scales, and traditional string instruments to underscore tension and melancholy. Ambient sound is given precedence in many scenes. The shuffle of sandals, the creak of wooden doors, the distant chatter of symposium guests. This attention to sonic detail immerses you more deeply into the era and reinforces the isolation of the protagonist. He exists in a world filled with people, yet perpetually alone. What sets this project apart's unique selling point? In many ways, it's its refusal to sanitize history. Ancient Greece is often idealized, especially in popular culture. We hear of democracy, philosophy, Olympic glory, but rarely do we hear about the institution of pederasty, or the transactional nature of many same-sex relationships in the upper classes. The tragic life of a male concubine in ancient Greece confronts that directly, not for shock value, but as an act of restoration. To tell this story is to acknowledge the people who lived in the margins of glory. It's a form of historical correction, and also a challenge to the audience. How much of this discomfort stems from ancient customs, and how much reflects power dynamics still present today? There's a quiet radicalism in that approach. Rather than presenting ancient homosexuality as a utopian free-for-all or as pure victimization, it explores the nuanced gradations between consent, coercion, desire, and duty. The project also avoids modern labels. The protagonist is not labeled as gay or bisexual. He is a person navigating an enforced sexual identity, shaped by the expectations of others. That distinction is powerful. It avoids the trap of retrofitting modern identities onto ancient lives, and instead focuses on emotional truth. If we look at the academic foundations of the project, it's clear the creators consulted a range of classical sources: Xenophon, Plato, Aeschines, and even fragmentary records from vase paintings and graffiti. There's a reverence for the past, but not an uncritical one. The source material is treated as evidence, not gospel. This makes the final product feel not only emotionally authentic but intellectually rigorous. Historians will find plenty to unpack. General audiences will sense the depth, even if they don't catch every reference. The pacing is deliberate. Some might find it slow, but that's intentional. The story is about waiting, enduring, being trapped. Time moves differently for someone with no agency over their own life. That temporal tension is built into the structure. Scenes stretch just long enough to become uncomfortable, then cut away with jarring abruptness. This technique keeps viewers slightly off balance, mimicking the emotional disorientation of the protagonist. If this project includes visual art or animation components, those are used sparingly but effectively. Perhaps it uses hand-drawn interludes to depict memories, myths, or internal monologues. These sequences contrast sharply with the realism of the live-action or mainline content, offering a glimpse into the protagonist's inner world, his dreams, regrets, or moments of imagined escape. The stylistic shift reinforces how much of his identity exists only in private thoughts. The tragic life of a male concubine in ancient Greece doesn't offer moral clarity, and that's part of its strength. There are no easy heroes or villains here. Instead, we re-given a portrait of systemic injustice that is both specific to its time and unnervingly familiar. Themes of commodification, control, and forced intimacy resonate beyond the ancient context. In doing so, the project forces viewers to grapple with uncomfortable parallels in the modern world, be it in exploitative labor, human trafficking, or the invisible economies of desirability and dependence. Technologically, if this is an interactive or digital experience, the user interface reflects the mood-muted colors, intuitive navigation, and layered storytelling elements that let users explore different perspectives. Maybe there's a branching narrative or journal entries written in the voice of the protagonist, providing supplemental depth. These features deepen the engagement without pulling focus from the central emotional arc. If it's a linear film or series, then the editing choices deserve praise for their confidence. Long takes, minimal cuts during emotionally loaded scenes, and a refusal to spoon-feed viewers all add to the maturity of the piece. Flashbacks are used sparingly and often presented with minimal visual cues, challenging viewers to stay alert, to assemble meaning from fragments, much like historians must do with the past.